The low hiss of the coffee machine and the clink of ceramic mugs formed the quiet rhythm of Emily Rhodes's Tuesday night. Another shift at Oliver's diner, chrome, checkered floors, red booths that stuck to your legs in summer. She moved like clockwork, topping off mugs and dodging greasy handprints, her mind somewhere else entirely. But everything froze: the noise, the motion, her thoughts, the moment his hand caught her arm. It wasn't rough, just deliberate, heavy with intent. The man in the corner booth, sleeves rolled over tattooed forearms, stared at her skin like it had just whispered to him. A deep, slitted look crawled across his face, something between recognition and disbelief. Emily's breath caught, the coffee pot wobbling dangerously in her grip. He leaned closer. His voice, low and raspy, was barely more than a breath. "This birthmark, it runs in our family." For a second, it didn't compute. She thought she'd misheard him. Then his thumb brushed the inside of her forearm, gently tracing the line of faded dots near her wrist, 5 small marks, spaced like Morse code. She'd stopped noticing them years ago. Now, under his stare, they burned. Everything around them, the late-night crowd, the jukebox hum, fell into background static. She pulled back instinctively, but not before seeing something dangerous shift behind his eyes. Not threat. Not lust. Something harder to name. Like memory. The man in the purple shirt, mid-50s, built like a boxer, voice like gravel, didn't shout, didn't cause a scene. He just looked at her like she was a ghost. That was the night Emily Rhodes's life changed. Until then, it had been a blur of triple shifts, lukewarm dreams, and rented furniture. She didn't have a family name worth anything. Didn't even have a real birth certificate. Just a gold locket with no photo inside, and those strange dots on her arm. But as she walked away from booth 9, hands shaking, she knew one thing for sure: that man knew more about her than she did. And he wasn't just any man. He was Alessandro Marino, the most feared Mafia boss on the East Coast. Emily locked the diner door behind her, the cold metal pushing against her fingertips like a reminder this night had been real. Her shoes scraped the concrete as she stepped into the alley, the buzz of neon flickering overhead. Steam rose from a nearby vent, swirling into the city's breathless sky, but her mind was elsewhere, stuck in that booth, in that voice. "This birthmark, it runs in our family." She could still feel his thumb brushing the marks on her wrist, as if he'd branded her with something she didn't yet understand. She walked home on autopilot, eyes barely tracking traffic, one hand shoved in her jacket pocket while the other pressed over the place he'd touched. Her apartment wasn't far, second floor of a crumbling brownstone on Larchmont, but it felt like crossing dimensions. The world had shifted. She could feel it in her bones. Alessandro Marino wasn't some eccentric customer. He looked at her like he'd seen a ghost, and ghosts didn't just show up for coffee. Her roommate Sophia was perched on the couch when Emily stepped inside, a face mask halfway peeled off and reality TV buzzing low from the TV. "Why do you look like you've seen a corpse?" she asked, not unkindly, setting her yogurt cup on the armrest. Emily didn't answer at first. She moved to the kitchenette, yanked open the fridge, and stared at the half-empty orange juice as if it had the answers. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. "A man grabbed my arm tonight. Said my birthmark runs in his family." Sophia blinked, caught between sarcasm and concern. "Okay, creepy. Like serial killer creepy or long-lost dad creepy?" Emily didn't know how to explain it, the weight behind his eyes, the slow certainty in his voice. Instead, she sat, turned her wrist over, and pointed. 5 faded dots in a loose arc. He stared at these like they were prophecy. It took an hour for the story to unravel. Emily told her everything: the booth, the stare, the name. "Alessandro Marino," she repeated. "I didn't recognize him at first, but after he left, one of the cooks went pale. Said he'd seen that guy before. On the news. Said he's Mafia." Sophia's brows rose, mouth parting. "Like, actual Mafia? Like cement shoes, not just tax fraud?" Emily nodded, the reality catching up in waves. She'd spent most of her life not mattering. Not really. Raised in foster homes, shuffled like paperwork from house to house, she'd learned early that being invisible was often safer. Her file said found at St. Augustine's Hospital, no identifying documents. Just a baby, left in a lobby with a fever and a blanket. A nurse had found the locket. She still had it. A small, heart-shaped gold pendant, worn thin with time, no engraving, no picture inside. She'd opened it thousands of times as a child, half convinced that if she stared hard enough, a clue would appear, a face, a name, a map. But it never changed. The birthmark on her wrist had always felt like a second clue, an accident of genetics. Until tonight. "Girl," Sophia said after a long pause, "we are not sleeping on this." She stood, yanked her laptop off the charger, and set it down between them on the coffee table. "We are Googling this dude right now." Emily hesitated, chewing her lip, but curiosity was already sinking its claws in. "Marino," Sophia murmured, fingers flying. "First name: Alessandro." The search results were instant and intimidating. Headlines blared in bold text: "Marino crime family under federal investigation. Alessandro Marino, the ghost king of the East Coast. From blood to bricks, how the Marinos built a Mafia dynasty." Emily stared at the images, a younger Alessandro, clean-shaven, eyes still cold. Beside him, an older woman. Then another photo, Alessandro again, this time holding the hand of a woman labeled Isabella Marino. The caption read, "Missing since 1996. Presumed dead." Her breath caught in her throat. That woman, Isabella, had her chin, her mouth. And on the woman's wrist, just barely visible in the image, were 5 faint dots. "No way," Sophia whispered. That's your mark." Emily leaned in closer, pulse hammering. The resemblance wasn't perfect, it never was, but her gut twisted in recognition. It was like looking into a parallel life that had gone missing. That night, Emily didn't sleep. She lay awake on the futon, the laptop still open, the glow dimming as the battery died. She thought about the way Alessandro had said it. Not with awe. With authority. As if she belonged to something she'd never asked for. And now it was knocking at her door. The next morning, Sophia shook her awake with a grin and a sealed envelope. This was on the front mat. No stamp. No return address. Just this. Emily blinked, tearing it open. Inside was a folded piece of thick, ivory cardstock. A business card dropped out first, embossed in black and gold. Alessandro Marino, private office. A phone number. Beneath it, a single handwritten line. Lunch tomorrow. 1 o'clock. My driver will wait outside. A second slip of paper fluttered down, a check made out to cash. $5,000. Emily stared. Is this a bribe? Or a test, Sophia said. Either way, it's baller. She didn't want to go. She didn't want to say yes. But something tugged at her from the inside, something old and sharp and wordless. Maybe it was the photo. Maybe it was the way he looked at her like he already knew. Or maybe it was the fact that she'd never, ever had a chance to know who she really was. "Do you think it's dangerous?" she asked. Sophia arched a brow. "Emily, you serve hash browns to drunk ex-cons at 2 a.m. I think this might actually be safer." They laughed, but beneath the humor was a pulsing tension, fear wrapped in hope. Emily had survived worse than a lunch. What she hadn't done was face the unknown. By the time the sun set, she'd made up her mind. She opened her dresser drawer and pulled out the locket. It felt heavier than it used to. Not in weight, but in consequence. Maybe tomorrow it would finally open for real. The following day moved like molasses. Emily called out of work for the first time in months, citing food poisoning, but it wasn't her stomach that felt off, it was everything else. Her nerves tingled like static under her skin, and she couldn't stop glancing at the clock, counting down to 1 o'clock with the unease of someone about to walk into an exam they hadn't studied for. She'd changed clothes 3 times, too formal, too casual, too plain. Finally, she landed on clean jeans, a navy blouse, and the cardigan her foster mom from House 7 had once said made her look respectable. By 12:30, she was pacing near the window, clutching her locket like a talisman. Sophia lounged on the arm of the couch, eyes sharp beneath feigned nonchalance. "You still don't have to go," she said, softer now. "I mean, this guy could be lying. He could be crazy. Or worse." "I know," Emily whispered. But what if he's not? At 12:57, a sleek black car pulled up to the curb. It didn't honk or idle obnoxiously. It simply waited, engine purring like a panther. Emily grabbed her coat, slipped the locket into her pocket, and looked at Sophia one last time. "If I'm not back in 3 hours, call the cops." "Already got 911 pre-dialed," Sophia said. "Now go find out if you're Mafia royalty." The driver was a clean-shaven man in his 40s, black suit, black tie, polite nod. "Miss Rhodes?" he asked as she approached. She nodded. "Right this way." The interior smelled like leather and something expensive and herbal, cologne maybe, or just money. They didn't speak on the drive. The city blurred past her window, grimy corners giving way to manicured hedges, storefronts replaced by private gates. By the time the car rolled to a stop, Emily realized they were far outside downtown. The Marino estate wasn't a house. It was a compound. Tall iron gates, stone paths, and a mansion that looked old money but lethal. Alessandro was waiting for her on the steps. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, no tie, top button undone. His posture was military still, his expression unreadable. But when he looked at her, there was something unspoken there. Not menace, not warmth. Something in between. "You came," he said. It wasn't a question. Emily's throat was dry. "I figured I owed you $5,000 worth of curiosity." A corner of his mouth lifted. "That was never meant to buy you. Just open a door." He gestured for her to follow. "Come. Lunch is ready." They walked through a grand foyer, marble floors, vaulted ceilings, framed oil portraits staring down like ancient judges. Every sound echoed, even her heartbeat. Emily clutched her hands to stop them from trembling. They reached a sunlit room with tall glass doors overlooking a garden of trimmed hedges and blood-red roses. A table was set for two. Alessandro sat, motioning for her to do the same. "I thought it would be best to talk somewhere private." His voice had lost none of its rasp, but it was quieter now, almost tired. "There's a lot to explain. But first, may I see it again?" Emily hesitated, then slowly extended her left arm across the white tablecloth. She turned it palm up. The birthmarks, 5 faded dots in a curve, stared back at them like old witnesses. He didn't touch her this time. Just looked. A long, weighted silence passed. "My sister had the same mark," he said finally. "Exactly the same. And when she disappeared, her daughter was just a few months old." Emily swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," she said, because it was the only thing that felt safe to say. "She ran," Alessandro continued, "from people who would have hurt her. From our father's enemies, and ours." His eyes grew distant. "We searched for years. The girl vanished without a trace. I always wondered if she'd survived." A waiter, silent as a shadow, placed 2 bowls of risotto on the table and vanished without a word. Emily stared down at her plate. The aroma was rich, buttery, faintly citrus. It didn't help her nausea. "I was left at a hospital," she said, quietly. "No name, no note. Just this locket." She pulled it from her pocket and slid it across the table. "It's all I've ever had." Alessandro picked it up gently. Opened it. Closed it. "I've seen this before," he murmured. "Isabella wore it when she was 15. Emily's breath hitched. The moment hung there, suspended between memory and revelation. "I need to be sure," he said, setting the locket down with care. "I can arrange a DNA test. Discreet. Fast." His eyes sharpened. "Would you allow that?" She nodded, barely trusting herself to speak. "I need to know too." He leaned back. "Good. I'll have my doctor collect a sample this evening. You'll have results within a week." They didn't talk much more. She ate a little, asked a few careful questions, how his sister had disappeared, why he believed her daughter could still be alive. Alessandro gave few details, but never looked away from her. He watched her like she was a puzzle he'd waited decades to solve. When the meal ended, he walked her to the car himself. Before she climbed in, he said, "If the test confirms what I suspect, your life will change." Then he added, almost gently, "But if it doesn't, it won't matter. You've already stirred ghosts I thought long buried." Emily rode home in silence. By the time the car pulled up outside her apartment, Her head was spinning. She had a man's face burned into her mind. A family name that belonged in newspapers, and the faintest hope that maybe, just maybe, someone had loved her once. She walked up the steps numb. Sophia opened the door in her pajamas, toothbrush in hand. "Well," Emily stepped inside and whispered, "he thinks I'm his niece. His sister's daughter. And we're doing a DNA test tonight." Sophia's jaw dropped. "Oh, holy crap." Emily nodded. "I think I might be a Marino." She didn't know yet what that meant. But she was about to find out. The second time Emily pulled up to the Marino estate, it didn't feel any less surreal. The black car glided through iron gates without a word from the driver, and the gravel road curved like a private secret through a sea of hedges and shadowed trees. She clutched her locket in her pocket, her fingers worrying the edges of the heart-shaped gold as if she could rub answers out of it. Every instinct in her buzzed, not with fear exactly, but anticipation sharpened by years of learning to trust no one. Today wasn't about serving coffee to a stranger. Today was about being seen. The mansion loomed like a cathedral of old money and long-held secrets. Ivy clung to its gray stone bones, and black-shuttered windows stared like unblinking eyes. At the foot of the marble steps stood Alessandro Marino, again in a dark suit without a tie, his presence as still and heavy as it had been in the diner. This time, Emily didn't wait for him to speak first. She stepped out of the car and met his eyes, unsure if she was stepping into a memory or a trap. "Miss Rhodes," he said with a nod, voice even. "Thank you for coming again." She followed him into the estate, her footsteps echoing through the grand entrance hall like distant thunder. Marble floors, a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a museum, and portraits, so many portraits, lined the walls, all bearing the same severe brows and dark eyes. The house smelled faintly of tobacco and lemon oil. Cold but clean. Historic but breathing. "This way," he said, guiding her into a smaller sitting room with tall windows and velvet armchairs. It felt less like a palace in there, more like a confessional. On a side table sat a wooden photo album with gold leaf corners. Emily sat when he did, spine stiff, legs crossed at the ankles. Alessandro poured 2 glasses of water, his movements slow, practiced. "I know this is overwhelming," he began, watching her closely, "but I'd rather show you than tell you everything." He opened the album and turned it toward her. The photo on the first page was black and white, dated in the bottom corner, 1992. A young woman with windswept dark hair smiled at the camera, arms around a man whose face was mostly obscured. Her eyes, however, were unmistakable, wide-set, tilted slightly, framed by lashes that mirrored Emily's own. Beneath the short sleeve of the woman's dress, just above the wrist, was a faint but familiar arc of marks. 5 dots. Faded but undeniable. "Isabella," Alessandro said. "My sister. She vanished in 1996 with her daughter, your age, if she'd survived." Emily's throat felt too small for air. He turned another page. A photo of Isabella alone this time, sitting on a fountain wall, one arm wrapped protectively around a small baby swaddled in a yellow blanket. The infant's face was turned away. But even that blurred profile made Emily's hands shake. "I didn't know her well," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "But I think she knew me." Alessandro closed the album. "I've waited nearly 30 years for a sign. Then you walked into my life with that mark and that face." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I won't pretend this is simple or without risk. But I believe it's worth exploring." Emily hesitated. "Exploring how?" "A DNA test," he said simply. "Not through a hospital or government lab. Privately. Securely. I'll provide everything. If it proves what I suspect, your family." Her heart beat so loudly she was sure he could hear it. "And if I'm not? Then we part ways with no harm done," Alessandro replied. "But either way, the questions that brought you here deserve answers." He gestured toward a side hallway. "My physician is already waiting. Just a cheek swab. Quick. Clean. Then we wait." Emily didn't move for a long moment. She thought about every quiet night she'd stared at the ceiling, wondering who she was. Every lie the foster system fed her about parents who probably loved her. Every cruel classmate who'd said being a nobody meant she'd die one too. And now here she was standing in a Mafia estate, about to hand her DNA to a man whose name could clear rooms. "I'll do it," she said finally. "But not because I believe you." Alessandro's eyes twitched with a hint of a smile. "Fair enough." The doctor was polite, efficient, and silent. A man in his 50s with calm hands and the kind of presence that suggested he'd seen more than he ever spoke. He swabbed Emily's cheek, sealed the vial, and handed it off to an assistant with a nod. Alessandro remained in the room but said nothing during the procedure. It felt strangely ceremonial, not unlike being baptized into a religion she hadn't signed up for. Back in the sitting room, Alessandro poured himself a drink, something dark amber. He didn't offer her any. "It will take 5 to 7 days," he said, swirling the glass. "We'll notify you when the results come in." Emily nodded. She wasn't sure what else there was to say. "Do you have questions?" he asked after a moment. "Yes," she said. "But I don't think I want the answers yet." That seemed to please him. Wise. "But I do want to know one thing," she added. "Why me?" "Why now?" Alessandro sipped his drink. "Because I've spent half my life wondering what became of Isabella's daughter. And when I saw you, something clicked. Like a thread finally tugging back after decades of silence." Emily wasn't sure she believed in fate, but there was something about the way he said it that made her heart ache. A truth lived there, broken and rusted, maybe, but still breathing. She looked at the locket around her neck, now visible just above her blouse. His eyes flicked toward it. "Isabella wore one just like that," he said softly. "She never took it off." Outside, clouds had begun to gather. The sun dimmed through the windows, casting the room in silver and shadow. Emily stood. "Thank you for lunch. And for not making this stranger than it already is." Alessandro rose with her. "I'll call when the results arrive." She stepped back into the hallway and past those portraits again, a gallery of haunted faces and powerful silence. Somewhere in this house, her mother's picture hung. Or maybe not. Maybe none of it was real. But the pull in her chest was stronger than doubt. The car was waiting again. The same driver. Same silence. But this time, Emily didn't feel like a passenger. She felt like someone driving toward a cliff with her foot on the gas, scared, but free. When she returned home, Sophia was already at the door. "Well," Emily dropped her bag. "I did it. Swabbed and sealed." "And the guy?" "Still tall, dark, and terrifying." Emily smiled for the first time in hours. "Yeah, but maybe not entirely terrifying." Sophia raised a brow. "You're into Mafia guys now?" Emily snorted. "God, no. But he might be the only person who's ever looked at me like I belong somewhere." That night, Emily lay in bed, turning the locket over and over in her fingers. She remembered being 7, sitting on the floor of a shelter with a cracked tile ceiling, wondering if her real mom would ever find her. She remembered birthdays spent watching the door, holidays with someone else's name on the gifts. Now, a man with inked hands and a powerful name said maybe, just maybe, she wasn't a mistake. She didn't know what would happen next. But she was ready to find out. What would you do if someone powerful claimed you were part of their family, but couldn't prove it yet? Would you walk away, or risk everything to find out the truth? Let us know your answer in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you're the first to know what Emily discovers next. The call came 5 days later, just past noon, when the sky was overcast and the world already felt a shade dimmer. Emily had been sitting by the window, sipping lukewarm tea, pretending to read a mystery novel she hadn't touched in hours. When her phone buzzed and the Marino number flashed on the screen, her stomach clenched so sharply she thought she might be sick. She almost let it go to voicemail. But hope, cruel, persistent, irrational, had its hooks in her. "Emily," Alessandro said when she picked up, voice quieter than usual. "The results are in." That was all it took. No explanation. No preamble. Just that flat declaration that turned her body cold. Her mind went blank on the drive over. She barely registered the city around her, the flow of traffic or the soft hum of the tires beneath her. Alessandro had sent the car again, same driver, same silence. This time, Emily didn't ask questions. She just clenched the locket in her pocket and stared out at the passing world, imagining every version of the truth that might be waiting at the other end of the ride. By the time she arrived at the Marino estate, the clouds had thickened overhead like a lid sealing shut. A storm threatened the edges of the sky, and her chest felt just as tight. She followed the driver up the stone path, heart pounding harder with every step. When the doors opened, Alessandro stood waiting at the far end of the hall. His face was unreadable, carved from stone, but his eyes gave something away, something tense and tired and hard to name. "Come in," he said. She followed him into the study this time, darker than the sitting room, lined with books that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. A laptop sat open on the desk, a single PDF file glowing against the dark mahogany wood. Alessandro gestured toward the chair across from him, then sat down, folding his hands. The silence stretched so long it felt like another test. Finally, he spoke. "There's no match," he said. "According to the lab, you and I are not biologically related." The words landed like a slap. Emily blinked once. Twice. "What?" she breathed, voice barely more than air. "The test came back with 0 shared DNA markers," he repeated, still calm, but his brows were furrowed now. "Statistically impossible if you're my niece." She stared at him. Her throat tightened, her palms slick. "So, I'm not her?" she asked. "I'm not Isabella's daughter?" Alessandro didn't answer right away. He looked down at the file, then back at her. "I don't know," he admitted. "I'm confused. I won't lie to you, this doesn't make sense." But it didn't matter. To Emily, it felt like the ground had vanished beneath her. The locket around her neck might as well have been a rock. She stood too fast, the chair legs scraping sharply against the floor. "You were wrong," she said, each word trembling. "All of this, the photos, the marks, the tests. It meant nothing." "Emily," he began. "No," she snapped, holding up a hand. Don't try to soften it. You looked at me like I mattered. And I let myself believe it. That was my mistake." She turned toward the door. "You still might," Alessandro said, quietly. She froze mid-step. "What?" "You still might matter," he repeated. "To her. To this family. But there's something off. Enzo and I are trying to make sense of it." "Enzo," she echoed, turning slightly. A tall man stepped into the room then, as if summoned by name. He looked to be in his 60s, dressed impeccably in a three-piece suit, silver hair slicked back, a presence that filled the space even without a word. He moved with a quiet confidence that told her he wasn't just some assistant. He was something more, the type of man people whispered about but never saw coming. "Enzo Marino," he said, nodding politely. "I was Alessandro's father's consigliere. Still am, I suppose." He walked over to the desk and glanced at the laptop. "This result is troubling," he said, "but not definitive." Emily's laugh was short and bitter. "It looks pretty definitive to me." Enzo met her gaze calmly. "Not necessarily. Not if Isabella's child had a different father than we assumed." The room stilled. Emily turned slowly. "What do you mean?" Enzo walked to the bookshelf, pulled out a leather-bound ledger, and set it on the table. The last year before Isabella disappeared, she was in a relationship. Secret. Dangerous. Not with someone from our circles. He glanced at Alessandro. There were rumors. Tensions. Your father thought she was betraying the family. Alessandro's jaw clenched. He never confirmed it. No, Enzo agreed. But he didn't have to. We both knew something was off. She stopped attending family events. She fought with your father constantly. And then, one day, she vanished. Emily stepped closer. "You're saying, if her child had a different father, then your DNA wouldn't match Alessandro's," Enzo said gently. "Because you wouldn't be his niece by blood." Alessandro stood now too, the lines around his eyes deeper than before. "It's a possibility we didn't want to consider. But it makes sense." Emily felt her stomach twist. "So who was he?" "The man she ran off with." Enzo shook his head. "We don't know. Not for sure. But if we can find a DNA sample from Isabella herself, we can know for certain." "But she's gone," Emily whispered. "There's nothing left." "Maybe not nothing," Alessandro said. "I kept her brush, her old compact. A few things I couldn't throw away." Emily looked at him, searching his face for some sign, something solid to cling to. "You still think it's me?" she asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I do." And despite the ache in her chest, the tears stinging her eyes, a part of her still wanted to believe him. Because even now, standing there as a negative result stared at her from a glowing screen, that photo in the album, that curve of 5 dots on a stranger's arm, they wouldn't let her go. Her instincts screamed at her to leave. Her heart begged her to stay. "I need air," she said, stepping out of the study before either man could stop her. The hallway was dim. The portraits lining the walls felt colder now, less like ancestors and more like silent accusers. Emily moved toward the front of the house, unsure where she was going, only knowing she needed out. As she reached the second archway near the staircase, she heard voices. Low, tense. She paused in the shadows, just beyond the cracked open door. "She's not lying," Enzo was saying. "She doesn't even know the story." "I know," Alessandro replied. "But what if we were wrong all along? What if Isabella wasn't pregnant with Marco's child?" "You mean?" Enzo hesitated. "You think it was him?" Silence. Then Alessandro, "If it was, the test wouldn't match me. It would only match her mother. And if that's true, everything changes." Emily's heart stuttered. She backed away slowly, the voices growing fainter with every step. It felt like she was drifting between worlds, the one she thought she'd escaped, and the one that refused to claim her. When she reached the front door, she didn't wait for the driver. She walked. The clouds finally broke open overhead. Rain fell in heavy sheets, soaking her hair, her clothes, her shoes. But she didn't stop. Didn't care. She walked down the long driveway and into the street, heart pounding, locket cold against her chest. Everything hurt. The test had said no, but every breath in her lungs still whispered maybe. The rain hadn't stopped by morning. It pelted Emily's apartment windows in relentless sheets, as though the sky itself was punishing her for hoping. She sat curled on the couch in one of Sophia's oversized sweatshirts, a half-eaten bowl of cereal going soggy in her lap. Her phone was silent, her inbox empty. No word from Alessandro. No news about the second test. It had been 3 days since she stormed out of the Marino estate. 3 days of trying to return to normal, if normal meant pretending she hadn't almost stepped into a legacy wrapped in guns, ghosts, and betrayal. She'd gone back to the diner once, but the clatter of silverware and the feel of her apron strings made her nauseous. Every sound, every customer's face reminded her of that moment in booth 9. Her world had cracked open, and now she didn't know how to seal it again. Across town, Alessandro stood alone in the study, staring at the fading light outside the window. The house was too quiet. Enzo had just left, promising to follow the threads that no one else dared pull. Alessandro turned back to the desk, where the photo album still sat open to the picture of Isabella with the baby wrapped in yellow. A memory clawed its way to the surface, one he hadn't let himself revisit in years. He was 27. Isabella had just turned 20. She was bright, reckless, always barefoot in the garden, always arguing with their father. One night, Alessandro had caught her sneaking out through the side gate, her face flushed, her hands trembling. "I love him," she had said defiantly, eyes blazing. "You can't stop it." The man's name was Daniel. No last name. Just a rumor, a drifter, an outsider, someone with no ties to the 5 families and no place at their table. Their father had flown into a rage when he found out. "She's not just anyone," he'd screamed. "She's Marino blood." But Isabella had never cared for the family name. Then came the scandal. One morning, Alessandro overheard Luca, their older brother, speaking in hushed tones on the phone. "We can use it," Luca had said. "She's a weakness now." Alessandro remembered the chill that ran through him. He'd known then, without question, that Luca saw Isabella not as family, but as leverage. Luca had always been like that, cunning, manipulative, dangerously charming. As children, he'd been the favorite, the golden boy. But beneath the polished surface was something darker. Alessandro had once found him cornering a business associate in the wine cellar, threatening him with things no brother should ever say aloud. When their father died, Luca made his move, tried to seize control, tried to reshape the family in his image. But Alessandro had stopped him. Quietly. Strategically. He and Enzo had forced him out of the estate, erased his name from the books, and cut every official tie. Luca hadn't been seen since. Until now. His motive, Enzo had said that morning. He knew about Isabella's relationship. He may have intercepted her. Hidden the child. Controlled the narrative. Alessandro didn't want to believe it. But the logic was undeniable. If he faked records, Alessandro murmured, pacing, that would explain the DNA test. Enzo nodded. He's the only one who could have done it quietly, and with the right access. We need to find him. I've already begun, Enzo said, his voice low. He was last spotted in Prague, 6 years ago. Back in her apartment, Emily opened her laptop and tried to drown herself in work. But every word blurred, every sentence turned to static. She kept thinking about what she'd overheard. What if the real father wasn't who they thought? It circled in her mind like a vulture. A simple phrase, but one that reopened every question she thought she'd closed. At 2:47 p.m., a knock rattled the front door. Sophia was at class. Emily padded to the door barefoot and looked through the peephole. No one there. Just the hallway and a plain padded envelope on the floor. No return address. No markings. Her pulse quickened. She picked it up slowly, half expecting it to tick. Inside was a single photograph, an old Polaroid, slightly yellowed with age. A young woman stood in a sunlit park, holding a baby close to her chest. The woman had wild dark hair and a familiar curve to her lips. Emily stared, her fingers shaking. The back of the photo was marked with a single line, IZ. She didn't disappear. She was erased. Emily's knees gave out, and she dropped onto the floor. IZ, the initials. Isabella Z? Her breath caught. She turned the photo over again and again, searching for more clues. There were none. She called Alessandro before she could second-guess herself. He picked up after one ring. Emily? I just got something, she said breathlessly. A photo. Of a woman with a baby. Signed IZ. It was left at my door. There was a pause on the other end, then a shift in his tone. Stay inside. I'm sending someone. I think someone's trying to tell me something, she whispered. Or warn me. Maybe both, he said. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She hung up and stared at the photo again. She wasn't imagining the resemblance. That woman, Isabella, she was sure of it, had her mouth, her brow, the same freckle just beneath her left eye. And the baby, though its face was turned slightly away, the shape of the cheeks, the wispy curl of dark hair. She clutched the image to her chest, heart hammering. When Alessandro arrived, he took the photo and studied it in silence. This was taken months before she vanished, he said. That park, I remember it. She used to go there to sketch. Alone. Or so we thought. Emily sat on the couch, arms crossed over her chest, the locket around her neck cold and heavy. She didn't vanish, she said. She was taken. Alessandro nodded slowly. If Luca had anything to do with this, it means he's still watching, still trying to control the past. Then what do we do? She asked. We dig, he said. Harder than before. And we don't stop until we bring every buried truth into the light. If you received proof that someone erased part of your history, would you confront them or protect yourself by walking away? Let us know in the comments how you'd handle it. And don't forget to subscribe to follow Emily's search for the truth, because it's only getting darker from here. The lab was tucked into the top floor of a building Emily would have walked past 100 times without noticing. It didn't have a flashy sign or frosted glass doors, just a brass plaque that read, Harris and Company. Private diagnostics and a buzzer that answered with a sharp click. Alessandro had called ahead. The receptionist, a woman with close-cropped silver hair and sharp eyes, ushered Emily in without a word. Everything inside smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender. Emily clutched the locket in her palm as she followed the technician down a quiet corridor. She hadn't opened it in years. Not really. Not since she was 12 and finally gave up hoping that one day a name or picture would magically appear. It had always been just a shape. A shell. But maybe, just maybe, it had always carried more than memory. The room they entered was small, sterile, and bathed in pale light. A sleek metal table sat at the center, with a tray of labeled instruments and 2 DNA kits waiting. Dr. Alden, the head geneticist Alessandro had spoken so highly of, greeted her with a firm handshake and an unhurried smile. "Miss Rhodes," he said, his voice calm and neutral. "I understand we're attempting a mitochondrial DNA match. May I see the item?" Emily nodded and opened the locket with trembling fingers. Inside, pressed into the small groove where a photo might have gone, was something barely visible, a single hair. It was dark, curled slightly, preserved by years of metal and silence. Dr. Alden adjusted his glasses and gently extracted it with a pair of precision tweezers. "We'll treat this delicately," he said. "But if the DNA's intact, we'll know soon enough." Alessandro stood silently in the corner, arms folded, watching. He hadn't said much since arriving, no commands, no reassurances. Just presence. As if his being there alone meant something. Emily couldn't tell if it was meant to comfort her or to keep her grounded in the storm that now defined her life. A few minutes later, another lab tech entered the room with a black velvet pouch. Inside was a pale pink hairbrush, old and faded, but still holding several long strands of hair caught in its bristles. Alessandro's jaw tightened slightly when he saw it. "This was hers," he said softly. "I kept it after she left. Couldn't bring myself to throw it out." Emily stared at the brush. Something about it made her throat tighten, maybe the thought of a woman brushing her hair and humming softly to a baby who no longer remembered her face. Or maybe just the weight of grief embedded in Alessandro's voice. Either way, it made the whole thing real in a new, aching way. This wasn't just about science anymore. It was about finding someone who had been lost long before Emily had ever arrived. Dr. Alden collected the samples with the quiet reverence of a priest at an altar. "We'll run both strands through mitochondrial sequencing," he explained. "It's the most reliable way to determine maternal lineage. If the woman from your locket is related to the hairbrush sample, we'll know." He gave her a gentle smile. "And it won't take long. You'll have results in 48 hours. Emily nodded, unable to speak around the knot in her chest. She hadn't cried yet, not when the first test came back negative, not even when she overheard Alessandro questioning everything. But now, standing in a clean white room with proof of a woman who might have held her once, something inside her threatened to crack. She pressed her fingers to the locket again, grounding herself. Not yet. Outside, the sky was finally beginning to clear. Gray clouds pulled back just enough for sunlight to kiss the tops of buildings. Alessandro walked with her to the car. They didn't speak until they were inside, the door shut, the world muted again. It wasn't the silence that made her nervous, it was how familiar it had started to feel. "I don't know what I'm hoping for," she admitted finally. "Part of me wants it to be true so badly it hurts. But the other part is terrified of what comes after." Alessandro looked at her, his eyes gentler than she'd seen them before. "Truth isn't always comfort, but it's clarity." Emily turned to the window. "What if the truth changes everything?" "It always does," he said. "That's why it matters." They reached her apartment, and he didn't ask to come in. Instead, he opened her door and handed her the envelope with a second copy of the lab authorization, just in case. "I'll wait with you," he said. "Through all of it. If you're hers, you're one of us. No matter what the paper says." Emily felt her throat tighten again, but she nodded. That night, she pulled the locket off and placed it on her nightstand, careful not to touch the inside. She stared at it until sleep pulled her under. In her dreams, she saw a woman with dark hair sitting on a park bench, whispering lullabies in a language Emily didn't understand. The baby in her arms had a gold locket around her neck. When Emily reached for her, the scene faded into mist. The next day crawled. Sophia tried to distract her with errands, coffee, dumb jokes. Nothing helped. Every hour that passed felt like a countdown. 48 hours couldn't come fast enough or slow enough. In the quiet moments, Emily let herself wonder, what if this changed everything? What if the locket had been holding her past all along? What if there was a reason she'd survived all those years feeling untethered, abandoned, out of place? She didn't want money. She didn't want power. She just wanted to belong somewhere that didn't vanish when she woke up. Alessandro called late in the evening. Enzo has a lead, he said. Luca may have contacted someone who worked at the clinic where Isabella gave birth. We're following it. Emily felt the hair on her arms rise. You think he altered the birth records? I think he had a reason to keep Isabella's daughter off the books, Alessandro said. And if that daughter is you, he may still be watching. Emily swallowed hard. So this isn't just about finding the truth. It's about staying safe, isn't it? Alessandro didn't answer right away. That's part of it, he said. But more than that, it's about righting something that's been wrong for far too long. As the second night passed, Emily sat awake at the kitchen table, staring at the envelope the lab had promised to send once results were ready. It wasn't there yet, but she knew it would come. And whatever it said, it would rewrite her. The question was, would it set her free or tie her to a legacy she never asked to inherit? The Marino estate was quiet when Emily arrived, the kind of quiet that felt curated, too still, too perfect. Shadows stretched across the stone floors, reaching like fingers toward doorways Emily hadn't yet dared enter. Alessandro met her at the entrance without a word and simply nodded, leading her down a different corridor than usual, narrower, less polished, the paint older. This wing hasn't been touched in years, he said as they passed shuttered rooms with dust-coated handles. It was Isabella's side of the house. The last door on the right creaked open to reveal a room preserved like a time capsule. Sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains, casting soft patterns across a cream-colored canopy bed and a tall bookshelf filled with worn novels. A vanity sat beneath a window, its mirror slightly cracked in one corner, and a ceramic music box rested beside it, silent but clearly once loved. The scent in the air was faint old rosewater and something else beneath it, maybe lavender or memory. Emily stepped inside, careful not to disturb anything, as though Isabella herself might return at any moment. She stopped sleeping here a few months before she vanished, Alessandro said quietly behind her. Said it made her feel like she was being watched. Emily glanced back at him. Was she? He hesitated. By Luca? Probably. There was something in his voice, guilt, maybe, or regret layered over something heavier. Emily moved to the vanity, her eyes drawn to a small wooden box half-tucked behind a brush set. It wasn't locked. When she opened it, inside lay a stack of handwritten pages, yellowed at the edges, tied with a ribbon that had once been red. She looked up at Alessandro. May I? He gave a single nod. She never showed them to anyone. Emily sat on the edge of the bed and began to read. The handwriting was slanted, sharp, but beautiful, each line a string of emotion knotted between confession and fear. I know I'm playing with fire, but I can't let go of him. Not Daniel. Not now. Not when he's the only place I feel like myself. Emily felt her breath catch in her throat. Page after page, Isabella poured her soul into ink. She wrote of secret meetings by the lake, of laughter shared behind closed doors, of a love she never imagined possible in a world built on rules and bloodlines. He's not like them, one entry read. He doesn't care about my last name. He sees me, just me. But the deeper Emily read, the more those entries darkened. Joy gave way to fear. Luca knows. He followed me. He threatened to go to father if I didn't end it. Alessandro leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her. She tried to tell me once, he said. I brushed it off. Told her Luca was bluffing. I didn't realize how far he'd go. The journal continued, the discovery of the pregnancy, the isolation, the growing paranoia. Isabella's fear bled through every page. I can't stay. He'll take her. He'll make her into one of them, or worse, erase her. Just like he promised. The final pages were dated only weeks before her disappearance. Daniel says we have to vanish. Make it look like we're gone for good. Burn the trail. I've never been more scared. But this is how I save her. This is how I become her mother, not just a Marino. Emily's eyes stung as she folded the last page. She stared down at the pages for a long time before whispering, "She ran to save me." Alessandro didn't reply immediately. When he did, his voice was thick. Yes. And I let her go without understanding why. She didn't trust you, Emily said, not unkindly. Because you didn't see what she was running from. No, he said. But I do now. Emily stood, walked to the mirror, and touched its edge. Her reflection was pale, tired, but steadier than it had been. For the first time, she saw not a lost girl, but a thread stretching back through time. Blood and fear and love woven together. She chose love, she murmured, even if it meant war. Alessandro stepped beside her. And now, the war is with truth. Emily met his gaze. And Luca. His jaw tightened. We'll deal with him. But first, let's finish this test. Later that night, back in her apartment, Emily couldn't sleep. The journal pages lived in her head now, every word a whisper, every sentence a promise. She imagined Isabella writing by moonlight, hand trembling, belly growing, heart splitting. She imagined her packing a bag in silence, slipping through the estate's gates while everyone else slept. Leaving behind a name, a family, a future for the sake of a child who might never know the truth. Emily touched the locket resting on her collarbone. "You were always trying to reach me, weren't you?" she whispered. "You just didn't know how." Sophia stirred from the bedroom. "Em? You okay?" Emily wiped at her eyes. "Yeah, I just read something I'll never forget." The next morning, the envelope arrived. It sat on her doorstep like a verdict. She didn't open it. Not yet. Not without Alessandro. She called him and said just 4 words, "It's time to know." The envelope was heavier than it should have been. Emily stared at it on the desk in Alessandro's study, her fingertips resting on the edge like it might burn her. The seal was still unbroken, the flap pressed shut with the weight of decades. Outside, the Marino estate was quiet, but inside Emily's pulse thudded like war drums. This was it, the moment everything would either fall apart or finally make sense. Alessandro stood across from her, uncharacteristically still, hands clasped behind his back. Even he seemed afraid to touch it. Enzo stood nearby, quiet but unreadably focused. No one in the room pretended this was just another test. This was the truth wrapped in paper. Emily finally reached forward and tore the envelope open with a sharp inhale. Inside was a printed report, 2 pages thick, clinical, and plain. Her eyes scanned the first lines, skipping past the jargon, the codes, the sequencing. She found the section labeled conclusion and froze. Her voice cracked as she read aloud, "Mitochondrial DNA is a 99.999% match between subject A and subject B, maternal relationship confirmed." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Alessandro let out a shaky breath, not relief, not joy, but something deeper. Like he'd been holding up a building inside him for years, and it had finally, mercifully collapsed. He stepped forward, and before Emily could process what was happening, he wrapped her in an embrace. It wasn't stiff or formal. It was raw, trembling, and real. "My niece," he whispered into her hair. "My sister's little girl. You're hers. You're ours." Emily let herself melt into it. For the first time in her life, someone wasn't holding her at arm's length. This wasn't a foster family or a social worker or a stranger with good intentions. This was blood. This was belonging. When they finally pulled apart, Alessandro's eyes were wet. "She would have been so proud of you." "I wish I remembered her," Emily said softly. "She remembered you," he replied. "Every time she defied father. Every time she fought to keep her name, her voice, her choice. She was fighting for you." Enzo cleared his throat gently. "If I may, this changes everything." Alessandro nodded. "Yes. It's time." He picked up the phone and dialed. "Assemble the council. Now." Within the hour, the Marino Council, a half-circle of older men and 2 sharp-eyed women, gathered in the family salon. They sat in high-backed chairs like judges, each dressed in charcoal and navy, eyes like polished stone. Emily stood beside Alessandro, her heart pounding in her chest like it wanted out. She had expected skepticism, maybe even resistance. She had not expected the chill in the room to be so immediate, so thick. Alessandro didn't hesitate. "This is Emily Rhodes," he said, voice steady and loud. "Born Emily Zena, daughter of Isabella Marino. The DNA confirms it." A murmur swept through the room. One man leaned forward, knuckles white. "We were told she died." She disappeared, Alessandro corrected. To protect her child from Luca and from what this family had become under my father. He looked around the room. She was right to run. The woman seated on the far left, tall, dark-eyed, with a silver brooch shaped like a dagger, narrowed her gaze. And you expect us to believe this girl is ready to carry the Marino name? I don't expect anything, Alessandro said. But I do insist you respect her place. Because like it or not, her blood is ours. Emily felt every pair of eyes pierce into her like daggers. She stood taller, chin lifted, even though her knees trembled. I didn't ask for this, she said. But I won't apologize for it either. A few brows lifted. A younger man, no older than 30, smirked in approval. The tension shifted, just slightly. Enzo stepped forward. We will circulate the full report to each of you. Independent labs, sealed chain of custody, no possibility of tampering. But you all need to understand something, he continued. Whether you welcome her or not, others will not be so generous. The room quieted again. What are you saying? The dagger brooch woman asked. I'm saying the moment Luca hears about this, he will act, Enzo said grimly. Because this isn't just about family anymore. It's about inheritance. Territory. Legacy. She's a threat, someone muttered. To his grip on the past. Alessandro turned to Emily and placed a hand on her shoulder. You have a right to know what that means. She looked up at him. Tell me. If Luca erased your existence, it wasn't just to spite Isabella, he said. It was to control what comes after me. You are now the last uncontested heir to the Marino line. Emily's heart dropped. You think he'll try to hurt me? I know he will, Enzo said. Which is why we're no longer asking you to believe. We're asking you to prepare. Emily looked around the room again. The legacy, the judgment, the unspoken weight of tradition. She saw distrust in their eyes. And yet, for the first time, she felt rooted. Not in their acceptance, but in the truth itself. The paper proved her blood. But her courage would prove her place. As the council meeting ended, Alessandro led her into the corridor, where the sunlight bled golden through the tall windows. He didn't say anything at first. He simply walked with her, their footsteps quiet on the stone floor. Finally, he stopped. Whatever happens next, he said, you won't face it alone. Emily nodded slowly. Neither will you. They stood there for a while, saying nothing else. But the war, she could feel it now, was coming. Would you claim your legacy if it meant painting a target on your back, or walk away to stay safe? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And be sure to subscribe, because Emily's not just discovering her past anymore, she's walking straight into a fight for her future. The headlines didn't say her name, but they didn't need to. Illegitimate Marino heir emerges after DNA revelation. Isabella's daughter returns, blood or bluff? The whispers moved faster than facts ever could. Within 24 hours of the council meeting, Emily's face was circulating through quiet channels of power, mostly blurred, usually speculated on, always dangerous. By the third day, someone tried her front door. Sophia was the one who found the scratch marks on the lock and the slip of paper wedged into the doorframe. It was torn from a notepad, the ink hurried and slanted. Stay out of Marino business or disappear like your mother. Emily read it twice, then burned it over the stove. Her hands shook, but her jaw was set. He knows, she said quietly. Sophia hovered close, eyes wide and frightened. You really think this was from him? Emily didn't need to say his name. Luca, the shadow uncle who had erased her mother, rewritten her existence, and now wanted her gone. She didn't know what scared her more, the note, or how unsurprised she was to receive it. Something in her had known this was coming. The locks were changed by noon. 2 plainclothes security guards, sent by Alessandro, now patrolled the hallway in rotating shifts. Sophia protested at first, then stopped after someone began calling the landline and hanging up when she answered. I hate this, she admitted, staring at the door like it might blink. You've barely been a Marino for a week, and already it's like we're living in a mob movie. Emily couldn't argue. It's not a movie, she said. It's a warning. At Alessandro's urging, she returned to the estate that evening. It felt different now, less like a mystery, more like a fortress. Marble and chandeliers still glittered, but behind every shine was the hum of surveillance, the tension of a line waiting to snap. Enzo met her at the gates. "We traced the note's paper stock to a hotel near the docks," he said grimly. "A known drop site for Luca's people." "He's not even hiding it," Emily muttered. "He doesn't have to," Enzo replied. "This is a message not just to you, but to the council. He's saying I'm still here." Emily balled her fists. "Then it's time I say something back." But the confrontation didn't wait for her. It came in the form of a dinner invitation, neutral territory, public, but unmistakably hostile. A discreet message sent to Alessandro, requesting a family reconciliation with Luca Marino. Enzo was livid. "It's bait," he said. "He wants to provoke, humiliate, or worse." Alessandro agreed, but Emily surprised them both. "I'll go." The silence that followed her words was thick and immediate. "You can't be serious," Alessandro said. "You don't walk into a room with a snake expecting conversation." "I'm not walking in for conversation," Emily said. "I want to look him in the eye. I want him to know I'm not hiding. He erased my mother. He tried to erase me. I want him to see the failure on my face." The meeting was set for 2 nights later, in a private room above an old waterfront trattoria, a place Luca had once used for business meetings before his exile. Emily wore black. Understated, sharp, deliberate. No jewelry except the locket. No guards, per Luca's demand. But Enzo and Alessandro waited downstairs. Close enough to act. Far enough to respect the performance. Luca was already seated when she entered. He didn't rise. He simply looked up from his glass of wine, smirked, and said, "So, the ghost speaks." Emily took the seat across from him, her expression unreadable. He was older than she expected, not in years, but in wear. Expensive suit, perfectly tailored. But his face, it looked stretched, pulled thin by ambition and bitterness. His eyes were pale, cold, and calculating. "You look like her," he said casually, swirling his wine. That same defiant stare. That same stupid courage. Emily didn't blink. "And you look like a man who's scared of the past." He chuckled. "Scared? No. Annoyed, maybe. The past should stay buried, sweetheart. Dig it up, and you find rot. You buried my mother to protect yourself." "I buried nothing," he said smoothly. She chose her path. "I merely watched it end." Emily felt her stomach churn, but she held steady. "You threatened her. You tried to take her child. You made her vanish." He leaned forward, voice sharp and low. "Because she was going to ruin everything. She didn't understand the legacy, the danger. She thought love was stronger than blood. And now here you are, proving how wrong she was." "Wrong?" Emily snapped. "She gave up everything to protect me. She left this empire, your cruelty, your name, to keep me safe. And all these years later, I survived. Without you. Without your name. And I still came back stronger than you expected." Luca stared at her for a long time. Then he laughed. "You really do have Marino blood," he said. "Which is exactly why you'll never survive this world unless you become it." She stood. "You don't get to decide who I become." As she turned to leave, his voice followed her like a knife sliding through silk. "Then let's see how long you last." Outside, Alessandro met her at the car. He didn't ask what had happened. He didn't need to. Instead, he said, "It's time we stop reacting. You need protection. Not as a guest, but as a Marino." Emily folded her arms. "So what, I let you hide me behind stone walls? Keep me safe in a cage?" "No," Alessandro said. "I give you the tools to fight back." She looked at him, really looked at him. The man who had grieved a sister, fought a brother, and now stood beside a niece who reminded him of everything he'd lost. "You pulled me into this," she said quietly. "Now help me survive it." He nodded. "Then you need to step into the legacy. Not as an heir. Not as a pawn. But as a player." "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, "from this moment forward, you're not hiding. You're leading." The garden terrace of the Marino estate hadn't hosted a family gathering in over a decade. But that morning, the long stone table was dressed in white linen, silverware gleaming in the soft Mediterranean light. Members of the family filled the chairs one by one, murmuring in low voices, watching the head of the table as if waiting for something to rise from the earth itself. Emily stood behind the tall glass doors inside, heart pounding beneath a sleek black dress Alessandro had chosen for her. She wasn't sure if it was armor or a target. She caught her reflection in the mirror, the same eyes as the woman in the journal, the woman in the photo with the baby wrapped in yellow. Her lips looked steady, her spine steel, but her hands trembled where they were clasped in front of her. She ran to save me, Emily whispered to herself. And I'm standing here to honor her. Alessandro appeared beside her, dressed in black with a silver pin at his collar, the Marino crest. They're ready, he said softly. The council, the cousins, the old guard, even the ones who doubted. If you want to speak, now is the time. Emily nodded. I'm not afraid anymore. The guests fell silent as Alessandro stepped to the center of the table and raised a glass. Thank you all for coming, he began, voice calm but firm. Today is not about politics or power. It's about blood, legacy, truth. He turned to Emily and, with a gentle nod, stepped aside. She inhaled and stepped forward, every pair of eyes locking onto her. My name, she began, is Emily Rhodes. But before that, it was nothing. I was a name assigned by a hospital. A baby left behind. No parents. No history. Only a birthmark and a locket and 1,000 unanswered questions. A hush fell deeper. I've spent my life trying not to wonder where I came from, because wondering only reminded me of what I didn't have. But now I know. I'm the daughter of Isabella Marino. Murmurs rippled. She left to protect me. To keep me from the war you all lived in, the walls, the knives behind the smiles, the politics disguised as loyalty. And I was supposed to grow up without ever knowing who I was. But fate, or maybe just persistence, brought me back to where it started. She scanned the table, eyes locking with each elder in turn. I'm not here to beg for my place. I'm not here to erase the past. I'm here to claim the truth that belongs to me. And to her. She turned slightly, nodding toward Alessandro. And to those who kept the truth alive. Alessandro stepped forward again. I am Alessandro Marino, head of this family, he said, voice clear. And today I declare that Emily Zena, daughter of my sister Isabella, is heir to her mother's estate, name, and legacy. Let it be recorded and respected. There was silence, brief, taut. Then a voice rang out from the edge of the terrace. That legacy died with her. All heads turned as Luca stepped from behind a marble pillar, flanked by 2 men in dark suits. He was dressed in black, but his expression was anything but mourning. You can parade her in front of the council, throw around titles and DNA tests, he sneered. But that doesn't make her family. It makes her a pawn. Emily didn't flinch. No, Luca. What makes me family is the blood in my veins. The one you tried to erase. Luca stepped forward, but Enzo appeared between them like a shadow rising from the ground. You weren't invited, Enzo said coldly. And you won't speak here. Luca's smirk faltered. Still Alessandro's dog, I see. Enzo smiled. Better a loyal dog than a traitor's ghost. He turned to the 2 men beside Luca. Remove him. They didn't hesitate. In seconds, Luca was flanked and walking backward, still glaring but powerless. This isn't over, he growled. You've made a mistake. Blood isn't loyalty. It's leverage. Emily met his gaze one last time. Then you'll finally understand why mine scares you. As he vanished beyond the hedge-lined exit, the tension broke like fog in sunlight. Alessandro lifted his glass again. To the truth, he said. And to the one who brought it back. The toast echoed, and Emily exhaled a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Later that afternoon, she walked the quiet path behind the estate alone. The garden sloped downward into a shaded grove, and at the far end, beneath a cherry tree that hadn't bloomed since the year Isabella disappeared, was a stone marked only with her name. No birth, no death, just Isabella. That had always been enough. Emily knelt before the grave and placed the locket gently at its base. You were never forgotten, she whispered. You were hidden, buried. But I found you. And I found myself. The wind rustled the branches overhead. She stood, brushed the tears from her cheeks, and smiled soft but unshakable. The war might still come. But she was ready now. The marks on my skin were never just birthmarks. They were a map. And I finally arrived. Thank you for listening to this story until the very end. There's another interesting one on your left screen that I think you'll really enjoy.